Emily and Jack thought they had found the perfect house. It was a beautiful Victorian home, nestled at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. The price was a steal almost too good to be true. They ignored the whispers from the neighbors and the strange chill that lingered in the hallways even on the warmest days. But on their first night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they heard it, a faint, melodic humming coming from the attic. They'd brushed it off as old pipes, but the sound grew louder each night, accompanied by soft footsteps and the scent of lavender. What they didn't know was that they weren't the only ones who called this house home. And their story was just beginning. Follow to find out what happens next. Olivia Hayes was the kind of person who lit up a room. She was vibrant, full of life, and had this incredible ability to trust people, to see the good in everyone. That summer, at the annual town festival, with the air buzzing with music and laughter, she met Nathan Drake. Their meeting felt like something out of a movie. A chance encounter that blossomed into what seemed like a perfect romance. In the beginning, everything was beautiful. They had those long, endless dates where they'd talk for hours, sharing secrets and dreams under the stars. They laughed until their stomachs hurt and built a little world just for the two of them. It was everything Olivia had ever wanted, but love can sometimes wear a very convincing mask. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, tiny cracks began to appear in their perfect world. It started with small things, things you could easily dismiss. A flicker of jealousy when she talked to a male friend. A few too many messages during her girls' night out, asking where she was, who she was with. Then there were the times he'd disappear for a day or two, offering vague excuses that didn't quite add up. Olivia noticed these red flags, but she was in love. She told herself that no one is perfect, that every relationship has its challenges. Love, she believed, was about accepting flaws and working through them together. Her friends, the ones who knew her best, started to whisper. They saw a change in her. She wasn't as bright, as carefree. Her family, especially her older sister, expressed their concerns more directly. They'd say things like, "He seems a bit intense live," or "Are you sure you're happy?" But Olivia would defend him, brushing off their worries. She was so invested, so sure that their love was strong enough to conquer any obstacle. What she couldn't see, what no one could truly predict, was the darkness lurking beneath Nathan's charming surface. His infatuation wasn't just intense. It was quietly, dangerously turning into an obsession. As the months bled into one another, the summer's warmth faded, and so did the illusion of their perfect romance. Nathan's jealousy wasn't just a flicker anymore. It was a constant, suffocating presence. He began to control every aspect of Olivia's life, cloaking it in the guise of love and protection. He needed to know her schedule, down to the minute. He'd check her phone, reading her messages and questioning every interaction. He'd subtly criticize her friends, planting seeds of doubt until Olivia started pulling away from the very people who were her support system. He wanted her all to himself, and he was methodically isolating her from the world. The relationship became a cycle of tension and temporary relief. The constant need for reassurance was exhausting. He'd create a problem, an argument out of thin air, just to be the one to solve it, to pull her back in and be her hero. Olivia felt like she was walking on eggshells, constantly trying to predict his mood, to say and do the right thing to avoid an outburst. She tried to end it. Multiple times she gathered her courage and told him it was over. But each attempt was met with an escalation she wasn't prepared for. The first time, it was tears and promises to change, declarations of love so desperate she felt guilty and gave in. The next time, the manipulation was sharper. He'd threatened to hurt himself, painting a picture where her leaving would lead to his complete unraveling. He made her feel responsible for his well-being. Then, the tactic shifted again, becoming more sinister. Subtle threats veiled as jokes, a grip on her arm that was just a little too tight, standing in the doorway to block her exit during an argument. The world outside their apartment started to take notice. Neighbors heard the raised voices, the slammed doors. Her social media, once a vibrant reflection of her life, became curated and sparse, with posts that felt forced or were clearly dictated by him. The light in Olivia was dimming, overshadowed by a constant, gnawing fear. But even in her darkest moments, a part of Olivia, the smart, resilient part, was fighting back in the only way she felt she could. She kept a private journal. It started as a way to vent her frustrations, but it evolved into something more. It became her secret record, her testament. She documented everything. Small incidents that seemed insignificant on their own, but, when woven together, revealed a terrifying pattern of control. She wrote down the dates of his threats, the exact words he used to manipulate her, the moments she felt most unsafe. She didn't know it then, but this simple act of writing, of bearing witness to her own reality, would become the most critical tool in her fight for freedom. Her journal was becoming a meticulous chronicle of his obsession and a powerful piece of evidence. The illusion of a normal life was completely shattered. Olivia was living in a state of high alert, a prisoner in her own home. Nathan's control was absolute. He had access to her bank accounts, arguing it was for their future. He'd show up at her part-time job unannounced, just to surprise her, but she knew it was to check up on her. Her phone was no longer a tool for connection but a tracking device. If she didn't answer his calls immediately, it would trigger a barrage of angry texts and accusations. He had successfully cut her off from almost everyone. Friends who tried to reach out were met with silence or curt, unnatural replies that she was forced to send. The fear was a physical thing now. It lived in the pit of her stomach. She'd flinch at the sound of his keys in the door, her heart pounding as she tried to gauge his mood from the sound of his footsteps. The arguments were no longer just shouting matches. They became terrifying displays of intimidation. He wouldn't hit her, but he'd punch the wall right next to her head. He'd break things she loved, a small vase from her grandmother, a framed photo of her and her sister. It was a clear message: I can destroy what you care about. And the implication was, I can destroy you too. One evening, after a particularly frightening argument over a like she had received on an old photo, Olivia knew she couldn't survive this. The finality of that thought was both terrifying and clarifying. She had to get out. But how? He watched her every move. That night, while he slept, she crept out of bed, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her pen. She opened her journal and wrote a detailed account of the night's events, adding it to the mountain of evidence she had been secretly compiling. Her chance came a few days later. Nathan had to leave town for a work conference he couldn't get out of. It was a 24-hour window of opportunity. The moment his car pulled away, Olivia moved. She didn't pack a suitcase. That would take too long and he might have come back. She grabbed her purse, her keys, her phone, and most importantly, her journal. She ran to her neighbor's apartment, a kind elderly woman who had always given her worried looks. With tears streaming down her face, Olivia finally said the words out loud. I need help. I'm in danger. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls. Her neighbor helped her call the police and a domestic violence hotline. When the officers arrived, Olivia, trembling but resolute, handed them her journal. As they read through the entries, their expressions turned from professional concern to grim understanding. The detailed, dated accounts painted an undeniable picture of coercive control, stalking, and psychological abuse. It wasn't just a he said, she said situation anymore. It was all there, in her own handwriting. The journey to healing was long and difficult. There were restraining orders, court dates, and therapy sessions. Nathan tried to contact her, using unknown numbers and fake social media profiles, but this time Olivia wasn't alone. She had a support system, legal protection, and the strength she had rediscovered within herself. Her journal was the key that unlocked her cage, but it was her own courage that walked her through the door. Olivia's story is a powerful reminder that abuse isn't always physical. It can be a slow, creeping poison of control and manipulation. But it also shows the incredible power of speaking up, even if it's just to yourself in the pages of a journal at first. Recognizing the red flags, trusting your gut, and reaching out for help are not signs of weakness. They are acts of profound strength. If you or someone you know is in a similar situation, please know that you are not alone and help is available. You can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Your voice deserves to be heard, and your story matters. Thanks for listening. One cool evening, Olivia decided to go for a walk to clear her head. The city lights were just beginning to flicker on, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She needed a moment of peace, a brief escape from the growing unease that had settled over her life. But she wasn't alone. Hidden in the shadows, a figure watched her every move. It was Nathan, his presence a dark secret trailing her through the quiet streets. That night, what began as a simple walk ended in unimaginable tragedy. The next morning, the sun rose over a deserted park, its first light revealing a scene of horror. Olivia's body was found, lifeless, under the old oak tree where she often sat to read. The community was shocked, heartbroken. How could something like this happen here? The police arrived, cordoning off the area with yellow tape. An investigation was launched immediately, but from the very beginning it was fraught with challenges. There were no witnesses who saw what happened. The weapon, a crucial piece of the puzzle, was nowhere to be found. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door, but no one had heard or seen anything unusual. Olivia was well-liked, a bright and kind person. Who would want to harm her? The investigators struggled to establish a motive. Robbery was ruled out since her belongings were still with her. It seemed like a senseless, random act of violence, the kind that terrifies any community. The initial days of the investigation were a flurry of activity, but they yielded very little. The leads were thin, the evidence almost non-existent. Among the many people interviewed was Nathan. He appeared calm, composed, and outwardly cooperative. He expressed his shock and grief, just like everyone else. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, he provided an alibi that seemed plausible. He claimed he was at home, alone, watching a movie. He even named the film and described a few scenes. With no one to contradict his story and no evidence placing him at the park, the police had little reason to doubt him. They had other potential leads to follow, other theories to explore. But one by one, those leads dried up. The case began to stall. Without witnesses, a weapon, or a clear motive, the investigation slowly, painfully, grew cold. The file on Olivia's murder was placed in a cabinet, another unsolved tragedy gathering dust. For her family and friends, the lack of answers was a constant, agonizing weight. Justice seemed impossibly far away. Months turned into a long, quiet year. The yellow tape was long gone, and life in the neighborhood had returned to a semblance of normalcy. But for Olivia's family, the wound was still raw. One afternoon, while cleaning out her apartment, her sister stumbled upon something tucked away in a drawer, a journal. It was Olivia's. At first, she hesitated to open it, feeling like she was intruding on her sister's most private thoughts. But a gut feeling told her she had to. As she began to read, her hands started to shake. This wasn't just a diary of daily thoughts and dreams. It was a meticulous record of fear. Page after page detailed a chilling narrative of threats, manipulation, and stalking. Olivia had documented everything: the unsettling messages, the times he would show up unannounced, the escalating aggression. And every entry, every dark premonition pointed to one person, Nathan. The journal was a bombshell. It was the voice of Olivia, speaking from beyond the grave, and it changed everything. Her sister immediately took it to the police. The dusty case file was reopened, and investigators began to look at everything through a new lens. Suddenly, what seemed like a cold case was burning hot with new possibilities. The detectives, armed with Olivia's words, revisited the initial forensic reports. They looked closer, and this time they saw what they had missed. There were faint scratches on the back door of Olivia's apartment, consistent with someone trying to force entry. A tiny, almost invisible trace of DNA found on the collar of her jacket was retested. This time, they had a suspect's profile to compare it against. Olivia's journal mentioned specific dates and locations where Nathan had confronted her. The police cross-referenced these with cell phone tower data and surveillance footage from nearby businesses that had been previously overlooked. The pieces started to fit together with terrifying clarity. Olivia's journal entries were not just emotional outpourings. They were a precise, factual timeline of her ordeal. The patterns she described in his behavior matched the subtle forensic evidence that had been sitting in an evidence locker all along. The journal painted a clear, undeniable picture. This was no random act of violence. It was a premeditated murder born out of obsession and control. Nathan wasn't just a person of interest anymore. He was the prime suspect. The alibi he had so calmly presented a year ago now seemed like a carefully constructed lie. The investigators realized they had been deceived by his composed demeanor, his performance of a grieving acquaintance. Olivia had known the truth all along, and she had made sure that one day the world would know it too. With the journal as their roadmap, the police launched a full-scale, covert investigation into Nathan. They obtained warrants to search his home, his computer, and his financial records. What they found was a treasure trove of corroborating evidence. Hidden in a folder on his laptop were deleted emails and messages, filled with the same threatening language Olivia had recorded in her journal. His search history revealed queries about the park's layout, police response times, and methods for covering up evidence. Financial records showed unusual cash withdrawals in the days leading up to the murder, and a purchase from an online store for an item that could easily be used as a weapon, an item that was never found. Every digital footprint, every financial transaction backed up Olivia's meticulous entries. It was as if she were guiding the investigation herself. The web of lies Nathan had so carefully woven began to unravel. The police brought him in for questioning again. This time, the atmosphere in the interrogation room was different. It was no longer a routine interview, it was an accusation. They presented him with the evidence, piece by piece. They read him excerpts from Olivia's journal, her own words echoing in the sterile room. They showed him the timestamped data, placing him near her apartment when he claimed to be at home. They confronted him with his own internet searches. At first, he tried to deny it, to maintain his composure, but the sheer weight of the evidence was overwhelming. His calm facade crumbled, replaced by anger, then desperation, and finally, a chilling confession. He admitted to following her that night, to the argument in the park that turned fatal. He confessed to everything. Justice for Olivia, once a distant hope, was finally within reach, all thanks to the words she left behind. Her journal, a testament to her strength and foresight, had solved her own murder. Olivia's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of trusting your instincts and documenting everything when you feel unsafe. She created a legacy of evidence that could not be ignored. If you or someone you know is in a situation involving stalking or threats, please know that you are not alone and help is available. There are organizations and hotlines dedicated to providing support, resources, and a safe path forward. Reaching out is a sign of strength. Thank you for watching, and please, take care of one another. Have you ever wondered what secrets a diary could hold? For Olivia Hayes, her journal was more than just a place to write down her thoughts. It became her voice after she was gone, a silent witness to a love story that had spiraled into a deadly obsession. This is the chilling story of how a seemingly perfect relationship turned into a calculated murder, and how a book of secrets brought a killer to justice. Our story begins with Olivia Hayes and Nathan Powell. To everyone who knew them, they were the ideal couple. Olivia was vibrant, smart, and full of life. Nathan was charming, attentive, and deeply in love. They had a picture-perfect romance, filled with romantic getaways, thoughtful gifts, and public declarations of affection. But beneath the surface, something was deeply wrong. Olivia, a meticulous record-keeper, documented everything in her journal. At first, the entries were filled with joy and excitement about her new love. She described Nathan as her soulmate, the man she'd been waiting for her entire life. But as the weeks turned into months, the tone of her entries began to shift. The sweet gestures started to feel different. Nathan's attentiveness slowly morphed into control. He wanted to know where she was at all times. A text asking if she got home safe became a dozen texts if she didn't reply immediately. He'd surprise her at work, not with flowers, but to check who she was having lunch with. He started making small comments about her friends, suggesting they were a bad influence. Olivia's journal captured this slow, creeping change. She wrote about feeling confused. Was this love, or was it something else? She'd write, "He says he just worries about me because he loves me so much. Maybe I'm overreacting." She tried to rationalize his behavior, caught in the classic cycle of an unhealthy relationship. One day he'd be suffocating her with jealousy, and the next he'd be the most charming man on earth, apologizing with expensive gifts and promises to do better. This is a classic red flag that's often missed. This cycle of intense highs and lows can be incredibly powerful and confusing, making it difficult for someone to see the situation clearly. Olivia was caught in that web. Her friends noticed she was becoming more withdrawn. The vibrant, outgoing woman they knew was fading, replaced by someone who seemed anxious and isolated. They tried to talk to her, but Olivia, caught between her love for Nathan and a growing sense of unease, would defend him. She was embarrassed and did not want to believe that the man she loved could be the cause of her fear. Her journal became her only true confidant, the one place she could be completely honest. She detailed arguments that started over nothing, a missed call, a friendly conversation with a male coworker. Nathan's jealousy became a constant presence in their lives. He convinced her to share her passwords, her location, her entire digital life. He framed it as a matter of trust and transparency, but in reality it was about complete and total control. One of the most haunting entries in her journal described a night when Nathan went through her phone while she was sleeping. He found old messages from a male friend and flew into a rage. Olivia wrote about waking up to him standing over her, his face twisted in anger. The love and adoration she once saw in his eyes had been replaced by something cold and frightening. That night marked a turning point. The fear in her writing was palpable. She started to plan, secretly. She began documenting every incident with dates, times, and specific details. It was as if a part of her knew that this information might one day be important. She wasn't just writing her feelings anymore. She was building a case, perhaps without even realizing it. Then one day, Olivia Hayes disappeared. Her friends and family were frantic. They reported her missing, and suspicion immediately fell on Nathan. He played the part of the grieving, worried boyfriend perfectly. He cooperated with the police, telling them that Olivia had been distant lately and that he feared she had simply left. He had an alibi, and with no body and no direct evidence, the police investigation stalled. For months, the case went cold. It seemed Nathan had committed the perfect crime. He moved on with his life, confident that he had gotten away with it. The community was left with questions and a lingering sense of unease. What had happened to Olivia? It was during a final, routine clean-out of Olivia's apartment that a detective stumbled upon something they had initially overlooked. Tucked away in a hope chest at the foot of her bed, underneath old blankets and keepsakes, was her journal. At first, it just looked like a normal diary. But as investigators began to read, a dark and detailed narrative emerged. The journal was a timeline of obsession and control. It dismantled Nathan's story of a happy relationship. Olivia's own words painted a picture of a man who was possessive, jealous, and increasingly volatile. She had chronicled his controlling behaviors, his baseless accusations, and his terrifying bursts of anger. The journal gave investigators a new lens through which to view the case. They re-examined Nathan's alibi and started looking for forensic evidence that would corroborate the story Olivia was telling them from beyond the grave. Her detailed entries gave them dates and times to focus on. An entry about a violent argument a week before she disappeared led them to re-examine security footage from her apartment building, which showed Nathan leaving in a rage that night. The most critical piece of the puzzle came from one of her last entries. Olivia wrote about a special place Nathan wanted to take her, a remote cabin his family owned deep in the woods to work things out. She wrote that she was scared to go but felt she had no choice. With that information, investigators got a warrant to search the property. What they found there was horrifying. Forensics teams uncovered traces of a struggle and eventually located Olivia's remains in a shallow grave not far from the cabin. The evidence was overwhelming. Fibers from Nathan's car matched fibers found at the scene. Soil samples from his shoes matched the soil at the grave. Combined with the powerful narrative evidence from Olivia's journal, the forensic findings built an airtight case. Nathan Powell was arrested. He was no longer the charming boyfriend, but a cold, calculating killer. The trial was a sensation. The prosecution's star witness was, in a way, Olivia herself. Her journal was read aloud in court, her words echoing through the silent room. The jury heard her story in her own voice. They heard her love, her confusion, her fear, and her final, chilling premonition. The defense tried to dismiss the journal as the dramatic writings of an unstable woman, but the forensic evidence was irrefutable. Every detail Olivia had documented, every red flag she had noted, was backed up by cold, hard facts. The story she told in her private pages was the truth. The verdict came back, guilty. Nathan Powell was sentenced to life in prison. Justice was served, but the story of Olivia Hayes left a permanent scar on the community. It served as a terrifying reminder that love, when poisoned by obsession and a need for control, can become deadly. Olivia's story is a tragedy, but it also carries a powerful lesson. It highlights the importance of recognizing the subtle red flags in a relationship. Control is not care. Jealousy is not passion. What happened to Olivia began with behaviors that are too often dismissed as normal or romantic. Her meticulous documentation, her instinct to write everything down, is what ultimately solved her own murder. Her journal became her legacy, a testament to the fact that truth has a way of coming out, even when it seems all hope is lost. This case reminds us to trust our instincts. If something feels wrong in a relationship, it probably is. And it's a powerful lesson in the importance of speaking up, whether it's to a friend, a family member, or in the private pages of a journal. You never know when those words might become the key to finding the truth. Olivia's voice was silenced, but her words live on. Her journal not only brought her killer to justice, but also serves as a warning for all of us. Pay attention to the signs, don't ignore your gut feelings, and never, ever underestimate the power of your own voice, even when it's just a whisper on a page. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more true crime stories that explore the complexities of human nature. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.